Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. Steve Jobs had, up until his last remaining days, only one book on his iPad or his iPhone, and it was the Autobiography of a Yogi. It was a book that he was very inspired by from a young age, very young age, and it was a book that he was said to have read every year for the last 40 years of his life. The book is about a journey of a man, Yogananda, who created the Self-Realization Fellowship and was credited to have brought yoga over to the U.S. back in the 1920s. And the interesting thing about him is that his influence and his impact that he had over countless people as a result of the information that he brought has changed so much lives to the extent that you couldn't imagine. And I wanted to do a discussion of this book before, but I started reading it and I stopped reading it. And it wasn't only till this week that I sat down and read the book. And then it opened me up to a whole new world that was part of a deeper realization that I had prior to various different kinds of books that I read. Books such as Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, The Kabbalion, The Seven Hermetic Principles, and a lot of spiritual texts that point to this interesting truth that we have connection within to what we call, as Napoleon Hill calls, the infinite intelligence or the divine consciousness. And Steve Jobs was able to create a lot of success in his life, but the success wasn't built on just him getting rich, but it was as a result of the products and services that he created that facilitated a lot of the technologies, a lot of the advancement, a lot of the ease of use and so forth when it comes to computers to allow us to create for ourselves through his technology, through his devices, other kinds of inspiration, guidance, software, essentially products and services that is designed to make people's lives better. I use a Mac myself, and my recordings and everything that I do is done on a Mac. So I can honestly say that the impact of this book is very deep. When Steve passed away, after they did their reception, they gave away this mysterious gray box to all the guests. And there was a lot of prominent guests that were there in that reception, and Steve had it all planned out, like he does with a lot of things. And the book that he gave away was the Autobiography of a Yogi. So if Steve was to, and he was able to achieve all the success that he has, benefit greatly from this book, so much so that he gave away as his gift to everybody when he had passed away, the Autobiography of the Yogi. It would then be advisable to, kind of explore what this book is about. And that's what I did. And contained within this book is a broadening perspective of how we see reality. Most of us see reality very linear, and the result of our reality is very linear and two-dimensional. But there's a part of us that believes that there is something more, that there are abilities that we can tap into that are far greater than what we have right now. And when you dig deeper into this, you recognize that the brain, or how we see reality based on the brain, based on how we program it, can be shifted. It's essentially called paradigm shifting. But this actually goes very deep. You can get to a point where you can see things that other people can't see. Now, in the entrepreneurs and the business world, some can see opportunities where others see obstacles, and others see obstacles where others see opportunity. The difference is perception, but there's more to it than that. They're able to take certain things that appear as obstacles and turn it into concrete results, such as the case with Steve Jobs. And this is just one layer. There's many other layers. There's elements such as when you are focused on what you want to create, you're able to attract certain people in your life, certain circumstances, certain situations that seemingly weren't there in the first place, but maybe they were because your awareness wasn't tuned. But the bottom line is this: when you focus your mind on something worthwhile, a specific purpose, all of a sudden you start to see certain people, certain circumstances, certain situations that show up in your life. And this was discussed a lot in Think and Grow Rich. So there's a lot of parallels between great business books, spiritual books, and the autobiography of Yogi. But I think what's the most powerful element in the autobiography of the Yogi is the stories that he describes. Meeting various yogis in the Himalayas who had various powers, what we would consider in Western culture to be superpowers, but they were the norm. And when asked about these powers, they talk about how these powers are actually available to all of us. And in order to be able to access these powers, we have to become self-realized, which is what I believe is the foundation of the personal development movement. Okay, the personal development movement, which I do all these discussions on, is based on the concept that the power is within. You have the power within yourself. And you can tap into this power to solve problems. You can tap into this problem, or I should say power, to make your life better, to be in contribution, and to be able to create things that would seem impossible to create. I mean, look at the extent of what Steve Jobs has created. But Steve Jobs wasn't the only person that was influenced by this book. Many have been influenced who might not be notable to achieve levels of success, whether it be worldly success or heightened levels of consciousness so they can experience a broader array of understanding of how reality works. And as a result of it, many books, many concepts, many ideas came from the process of self-realization. A few weeks ago, I did a book on how to be your own best friend. And when you recognize the power behind this, you start to realize that, well, a lot of times in our lives, we look for others to provide us the love, to provide us the support, to provide us the guidance. And while that's beneficial at earlier stages, there comes a point of our life where we recognize that we actually have the ability within ourselves. So then we go on a journey to become what Stephen R. Covey calls in his process interdependent. Okay, so it starts off as being dependent, and then we become independent, and then we become interdependent. Now, the model is very similar to what's discussed in this book. And interdependence essentially means connectedness to everybody and working together as a team with everybody. Okay, working together as a team, humanity working together as a team. When consciousness raises up, when we start to lift up our thoughts, lift up our vibration, as Napoleon Hill puts it, we start to recognize that we have a broader range of vision. We're able to see the implications of our actions many steps down the road. From the Kabbalion, every cause has an effect, and every cause has a trickling effect. It's not just one for one, but it has an impact in the medium term and the long term, and it can have an impact over the years and decades and centuries. When you elevated yourself, when you lift yourself up through the process of how they discovered through Kriya Yoga, you're able to see a broader, and not just see, but understand the intricate fabric of how everything is connected together. And as far as entrepreneurship goes, business building, which I talk about in this channel, you're able to create things that are able to bring people together, create products and services that facilitate better production and output that is not necessarily just designed for profit, but is designed to bring the divine order into fruition. Connectedness, bringing people together, sharing value, distributing more value, lowering the costs and different kinds of barriers of entry for others and yourself to participate, for example, in entrepreneurship endeavors, or access to resources that could benefit them so they could live a fulfilling life. So they too can level up to be able to see a broader perspective, a broader depth and dimension of understanding so that they too can create. And we all have access to this. And so when I was going through this book and I was reading the stories of the various yogis, I started to notice a shift within me. As much as I think that I had understood to a certain level the concepts, because I've been studying the spiritual stuff for a long time. And in my entrepreneurship endeavors, coming across Think and Grow Rich and really working with the principles of the law of vibration and connecting with infinite intelligence, I thought I knew it pretty well. But I think Yogananda had gone very deep into this, and he experienced a lot of things that, as simplistic as the writings might seem, the book has a certain kind of energy, a certain kind of frequency that is felt and it's apparent and is experienced by anybody who reads it. In other words, those that read the book and finish the book and put the book down are different people. Reality starts to look different. Possibilities start to increase. The need and the drive to go within yourself and realize yourself and realize the connection that you have to infinite intelligence, that drive goes up. And you begin to start meditating and you begin to realize that a lot of the answers that you are looking for outside are actually within yourself. And that the great spiritual masters and the great teachers would always, after they would give you their advice and so forth and help and guide you to a certain degree, teach you how to go within yourself to discover that next level advice. So let's talk more about this book here. And what I've done is I've actually combined it with quotes that I pulled from him as a general, as well as another book, that Law of Success, which I also read along while I was reading this book. And I also want to share quotes from you from that. The body is literally manufactured and sustained by mind. The body is literally manufactured and sustained by mind. Mind is the wielder of muscles. The force of a hammer blow depends on the energy applied. The power expressed by a man's bodily instrument depends on his aggressive will and courage. The body is literally manufactured and sustained by mind. Well, there's no doubt that those that have strong presence of mind, the ability to focus single-handedly on a task till completion, to avoid distraction, to stay on purpose, and see their vision to fruition, are more likely to create success, such is the case with Steve Jobs. But there's a process that we can go through to exercise our ability to focus our mind, to avoid distraction. There's physical elements to ourself. Okay? We've got our physical brain, and we actually have 3 brains. In the triune brain, we talked about it in Pitch Anything. If you haven't seen that video, watch that. We've got the croc brain, which is like the lizard brain. Then evolved from that is mammalia. And above that, we have the neocortex. And these brains, these 3 brains that evolved, don't actually work really well together. So one of the things we have to do is we have to practice aligning them together. And one of the best ways to do it is through meditation. One of the best ways of doing it is to practicing willpower as well. The last video I did was all on the subject of willpower, and we could use the tools and resources covered in that book and in that video to help increase our willpower. In Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill talked about the 6th sense and the connection to the infinite intelligence and raising your vibration. Very esoteric concepts. But he also mentioned that you couldn't have access to that power unless you did all the other principles. The other principles were essentially developing the will, developing focus. And even in the video that I did on willpower, we talked about the 4 pieces that I'd learned from Wyatt Woodsmall about cultivating success in anything, or cultivating the ability to do magic, which essentially is your ability, it's nothing far out, your ability to do the following: focus your will, increase your level of awareness, purify your intent, and consistently and diligently work on improving the quality of your character. These were the pieces that were covered in Think and Grow Rich. These are the pieces that are covered in the Yogananda's work. When a person works through various exercises, not just meditation, I believe, but through the process of living and being of service to others and working on themselves, self-realizing and lifting up their thoughts and making sure that their thoughts and their feelings and their actions are aligned, then you start getting access to intuition to a degree like you wouldn't believe. You start to access this infinite intelligence. True saints effect changes in this dream world by means of a will harmoniously attuned to the creative cosmic dreamer. So if we're all connected in some shape or form, and we are all connected to what he calls in the book superconsciousness or superconscious, which is the same, you could look at it from the perspective of infinite intelligence or the ether or whatever. If we're all connected in some shape or form, wouldn't it make sense to reestablish the connection that maybe we have broken through the various activities or ways of living that we have done? And through that process, we'll start to see how to resonate and be more connected with others. And from there, we will be getting divine guidance. Now, you'll see a lot of entrepreneurs out there, and this is very common nowadays as we have access to this information. And humanity as a whole is becoming more self-realized based on this kind of content and this kind of information that we're discussing. They're intuitive entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs that make decisions based on intuition. Now, there's a lot of research and study of intuition. Is it from your past experiences, or is it from infinite intelligence or whatnot? I think all of it matters. I think it comes from a combination of everything. It's not one or the other. Because in the Kabbalion, they talk about how all truths are half-truths. So the universe is not as rigid and linear as we think it is. Reality doesn't operate like that. The rigidity we create in our own minds. And the rigidity that we create a lot of times limits us. We believe we have to do it a certain way. And if we can't do it that way, then we don't look at opportunities to try it different ways. In other words, we can't see a broader perspective. We can't see longer range because we haven't elevated ourselves. A good book to read is As a Man Thinketh. They get really deep into this stuff. And this is some really deep stuff. We couldn't possibly discuss this and create a level of understanding of perfection in one conversation. This is the kind of information that we need to be studying over and over and over again while implementing the concepts from the book, the concepts from Think and Grow Rich, what we're discussing here as far as his videos, till you become higher realized. You start to see these things for yourself. Then, what we're discussing will have more depth. It will have more meaning. It will have more understanding to you. And pragmatically speaking, you can work with this. The information that a lot of people do not have access to because they see reality from a linear perspective. Cause and effect, very linear. But for every cause is an effect, and there's a lot of effects that we don't see. We can train ourselves, we can raise ourselves up, we can increase our level of awareness to be able to see the impacts, the effects of a thought, the effects of our actions through practice. That's how you acquire wisdom. Which is why I also believe that when it comes to learning as a whole, it's best to learn from a multidimensional perspective. Not just theorizing from this book, not just meditation, but doing, by applying, by using this information to create positive change, to create something that is of value to others as an entrepreneur, for example, reinvest those profits back into growing yourself, growing others, and so forth. A lot of times, this book is not really discussed from that perspective, and that's fine with me because these are my insights and perspectives that this book has further dimensionalized for me. And I believe it's the same case with Steve Jobs. He was able to live a very fulfilling life because he looked at his life from a broad spectrum of areas. Steve Jobs was really focused on what he wanted to create, on what he wanted to contribute. His inspiration came from a higher vibration, lifting up his thoughts. And in a lot of decisions he made, people thought he was crazy because he was able to see beyond, because he was able to see things long term down the road that others could see because they were too caught up with a linear perspective or too rigid in their belief systems to realize this important truth. That your belief systems might serve you right now, but just like before, your belief systems change as you evolve, as you grow, as you encounter and experience different life experiences. So the key here is to be more open-minded. Okay, read this book when you read it with an open mind. When he shares the stories of the yogi, for example, that's levitating, when he shares the story of the various yogis in there that have these powers, one that can manifest scent. When you're too rigid in Western culture or rigid in that kind of thinking, which is strictly based on a very linear way of looking at reality, it's easy to reject it. It's easier to believe that it isn't so. And kind of, dismiss it as like it was crazy. But if Steve Jobs, who is, in my opinion, quite pragmatic based on the results that he created, wanted others to read this book, he shared it with all the prominent people that were there and wanted us to consume this information in there. He wasn't trying to convince us to believe what was in the book, but rather expand our mind. Believe in this, there is possibilities. Think about this. When you were a child, you believed in possibilities. You believed that there was greater and bigger ways of doing things. And with that possibility, you tapped into an energy that you had that would allow you to pursue what you were pursuing with such joy, such happiness, such vigor, such excitement, that a lot of times you were able to create in your reality, manifest in the reality that of what you desire. As we go through life, we become disenchanted through just repetitive process. And as a result of that, there's parts of us that we don't tap into as much. Now, one of the things that I do is I teach the speed reading workshops for iris reading, and one of the big things in the workshop is tapping into visual elements to help us increase our reading speed, comprehension, and retention. And tapping into visual elements even for memory. Well, the interesting thing about that is that we don't really practice a lot with visualization. We don't actually visualize that much, which was a very important component in Think and Grow Rich. Well, Steve Jobs was a visionary. He imagined things that others, if he talked about it to others, they would think he was crazy. But he didn't allow that to influence him, because he knew that if he had a vision for something, then that was as concrete and real as the physical equivalent, and that it was only a matter of time before he was able to see it in physical reality. He would be able to figure out how to make it happen. Also, think of it from a different perspective like this. Right now, wireless networks is so normal to us. Everywhere we go, we have wireless networks. We can access apps, we can access email, we can access conversations with people from all different kinds of social media platforms and so forth. Back in the days when Marconi discovered this, this was discussed in the Think and Grow Rich Legacy movie that I did a discussion on. This was in that movie. They talked about it in there. Put a link in the description for that discussion that I did, and I recommend watching that movie as well. They thought he was crazy for thinking that he could send wireless signals, messages through air. Even before there were airplanes, people would think you were crazy to think that you could fly somebody across the sea and land them with such precision and safety on this big hunk of metal. They would think you were mad. Well, look at the technology we have right now and the ability to create results. If you're an entrepreneur, for example, the barrier of entry is so low. Who created all of this? Well, it was humans. Where did they get the ideas from? And how did these ideas become so profitable for those that created it? Well, interestingly enough, what I believe is, and a lot of people talk to me about this, they say, how do I find my purpose? And, I reflected upon in my life right now where I feel the most purposeful that I ever felt. And every week and month that goes by, every day that goes by, I become more refined on purpose. Similar to like the movie Hero Dreams of Sushi. How did I get to that point? By incorporating the principles that Yogananda talks about in this book. Now, I didn't read this book until recently, but the principles that he talks about in the book were principles that I read in other books, that I acquired from other mentors, that I acquired from different learning experiences, and I kind of pieced them together. And that was fundamentally this. I believe that we need to be in service towards a higher vision, a higher power. And that higher power is not just blind faith in the unknown of some deity that exists, but to lift up your thoughts to recognize that somehow, some way, infinite intelligence or universal power or cosmos or whatever you want to call it, God, wants to be able to create and evolve the human species to a higher level, to create different things in reality that we know, to evolve us to a higher level of efficiency, while not losing the connection, because it's the connection that we have to this infinite power that gives us the insights, that gives us the perspectives, that gives us the information. And so with the Yogananda, what he wanted to do was he wanted everyone in the West to recognize that you can have both. You can have the efficiency of the West while keeping the consideration and embracing the spirituality of the East. And if you embrace both, you can do it even better. Now, I'm in Los Angeles, and I see this a lot. He created the self-realization movement in Los Angeles. He was in Los Angeles. And I think one of the reasons why he came down here is because he felt that over here, which is, a hub, California is a hub for technology and a lot of volatility and so forth. I mean, a lot of interesting people down here. I meet a lot of people, and the ones that tend to do really well over here are more in a flow state. If you haven't read Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book, Flow, I recommend reading it. They're in a flow state. But the flow state that they're in is one of calm and smoothness, and they're able to create a lot of success. Almost, it seems like magic. They seem to attract all the right opportunities, the right people. They have the pleasing personality that people want to deal with. But then there's others who just try really hard and they just pretend to be someone that they're not. And they might appear to have the trappings of success, but they're always taken advantage of, and they don't have a lot of joy, and they're not really happy. So one of the reasons why I believe that is to be so is because they're not really practicing being purposeful. So again, going back to what I was talking about, what I believe to be purposeful in life is 3 criteria. Number 1 is that we're in service towards a higher purpose, towards the infinite intelligence. And then from there, we get access to knowledge and information that will allow us to create in reality new, better ways of doing things, whether it's tech, whether it's ideas and so forth, to improve the lives of others. Number 1. In that process, we discover what makes us happy. Because there's many things that you can do. There's many different kinds of, there's an infinite, that's why it's called infinite intelligence, ways of making a contribution. Many ways. You can make it through entrepreneurship, you can make it through nonprofit, you can make it through all kinds of ways. But whatever it is, if it's really for you, you will be happy doing it. And number three, I believe that you will be rewarded greatly for it. On the physical world, you'll make good money, you will have the resources that you need to live the life that you want. And not everybody wants the same level of resources. Some want to make more money and some want to make less money because the lifestyle they choose. But the lifestyle that we choose, if we're aligned with this process that we're talking about, is one of contribution. We enjoy the life so we can serve others better. And by serving others better, we become happier. You're happy in life when, and I can speak from my own personal experience and those that I've talked about this, when you do things that you believe are for a greater vision for yourself, for those that you care about, for the future of humanity, plus you love doing those things. That's why Steve Jobs always said, and one of his famous quotes is, you've got to find what you love. And that's the most important thing to do. Follow your heart and intuition. He says this. Everything else is secondary. And I believe that he did that. He lived that. So he lived the philosophy. So his words have that much more impact. And when I heard the commencement speech, and I'll put a link to it, and I recommend you watch it, it had that kind of impact on me. And he really lived that philosophy to the point where he was able to create in reality products and services that are needed and useful. So he was of great service. He obviously got paid really well for doing it. He earned a lot of respect and lived a very extraordinary life. Number two. And number three, he was happy doing what he did. He loved what he did. And that's the case for a lot of people that do these three things that I'm talking about. So think about that for a moment and ask yourself the question, is what you're doing of highest service and real value towards others? Not hypothetical value of what you think is value, but real value. Value that's designed to enrich lives of others. Really. And it can't be something that you impose over them. And how do you discover this? By lifting up your thoughts. Meditation, the information that was covered in this book. Because then you get these insights, then you get these hunches, these inspirations. And what you'll find is that those things will actually make you happy. Now, we also talked about willpower. So there are going to be things that you're going to need to experience towards creating your vision, manifesting your vision, that aren't going to necessarily be things you like to do. But they're required, because we're talking about physical laws here in reality, cause and effect as well. We also live in physical reality. As much as there's a spiritual side to us, there's also a physical side to us. And in physical reality, we have to follow these certain physical laws. And one of the physical laws is that you've got to do and learn all these valuable or important skills. For example, in entrepreneurship, you're going to need to learn how to sell. You're going to need to learn how to market. You're going to need to learn how to build teams and a lot of different kinds of things we've talked about in, for example, the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber and maybe The Way of the Wolf by Jordan Belfort. And if you've got a real passion for creating value for others, then you're going to find and create the joy in learning those skills. That was the case for me. I didn't enjoy doing a lot of those skills, but I realized that if I was going to live from this perspective of creating and being of service and be happy doing it and enjoy doing it and be rewarded greatly for doing it, that there was going to be things that I was going to have to do whether I feel like it or not. And those were the things that were going to develop my willpower, such as going to the gym and being consistent on my workouts. Just a small example, but I'm sure we can think of many things for ourselves that aren't necessarily things we like doing, but we can develop willpower. And believe me, with those things that you develop willpower on, you're going to get a deeper joy like you can't believe. You're going to be doing those things that's going to allow you to tap into more of this infinite intelligence because you're showing commitment. Infinite intelligence wants to see that you are showing commitment. That's why this whole process of self-realization doesn't happen overnight. A lot of people start on the journey and stop and maybe never get to the levels that they aspire to in this lifetime. For some people, it takes many decades, 40, 50 years. Some of us, a lot more efficient and effective in our ways of doing things, maybe get there in early stages through self-discipline and cultivating willpower to do the right things every day while removing the wrong things. But the more you do the things that don't serve you or don't serve others and don't lift you up like this, the more we procrastinate and delay ourselves from the higher levels of realizations, which have higher levels of rewards that even go beyond the material. Because it's the feeling within. Tying back to what I talked about in the book, How to Be Your Own Best Friend, one of the important pieces is that we usually tend to come from a place of neediness or approval seeking in the earlier stages of our lives, where we're always looking for others for approval, and people have this joy or happiness or pleasure that they can give to us, and as a result of or money even, if they give it to us, then we're happy, and if they don't, we're angry at them or we resent them. The truth is that if you're going down this path, you're going to attract people that are going to probably treat you badly when you display your approval-seeking and needing validation behaviors. Not because they want to treat you badly, but because you're on this pathway to grow. You're going to a higher level. And as a result of it, you're attracting these people to teach you a lesson, to help you learn. Once you get away from needing approval from others and validation from others, you start to learn how to generate that within yourself. And then you get deeper into your meditations and you're deeper into connection. So he says, the knowing in body, mind, and soul that we are one with the omnipresence of God, that we do not have to pray that it comes to us, that we are not merely near it all times, but that God's omnipresence is our omnipresence, that we are just as much a part of him now as we ever will be. All we have to do is improve our knowing. So we talked about this earlier. Changing your paradigm around. I heard a very profound statement. Bob Proctor mentioned this in his program, You Were Born Rich. And I believe they gave the videos of the program and they put it on YouTube. So I recommend watching that. And he said something very interesting. He said, do you know that awareness is really what we're looking for, is all we're really looking for? And I thought about that and I was like, wow, that's very deep. Because if you have the awareness of how to create what you want, then you just follow the process. And if you don't follow the process, and you have awareness as to why you don't follow the process, then you resolve the matters that prevent you from following the process. And so our goal in life is to increase our awareness. Increase our awareness. Now, the interesting thing, according to Yogananda, is the more we increase our awareness, the more we lift ourselves up to this connection with infinite intelligence. Think about that for a moment. Those that have the ability to connect with infinite intelligence, the yogis and so forth, are able to, and not just the yogis, people do this all the time, entrepreneurs, intuitive entrepreneurs, people in reality, we've actually done it a lot of times than you might have even thought about it. When you actually do that, you're getting this information that was always there. Einstein said it, you can't solve the problem in the state in which you created it. So what do? Well, you change your state. Tony Robbins talks about this a lot too. Change your state. Think about this for a moment. Flow is a state. There's different states that you're in. Some are empowering and some are disempowering. Think about this for yourself. Think about a time when you were in an empowered state, a state of empowerment. How did that feel? Did you feel blissful? Did you feel connected with others? Did you feel that everything was possible? All your dreams were going to come true? Energetically, you felt energized, a look on your face, you had a glow. People were commenting maybe on your glow and your vibrancy. Well, that is of a higher vibration. That is of a more of a connection to infinite intelligence. And the insights and the ideas that flow through you were so crystal clear and pure that you would act upon it and produce results right away, just like that. You had a heightened level of awareness in that case. Now, it's my recommendation, and I recommend this to all my clients, coaching clients, private clients, friends, and so forth, because I've been working with this, is to take an inventory of your life and really recognize where in your life there are people, situations, circumstances, environments, etc., that are lowering your consciousness, lowering your vibration. Is it certain kinds of information that you're consuming? And then also, on the flip side, look for information that raises your vibration, raises your consciousness, brings you to those places where you have that empowered state. Perhaps there's certain activities that you do that raise you up to have this higher level state. Soon you'll be able to tune it like a musical instrument. That's the experience that I have. I can tune it now because I've been working with this for many years, like a musical instrument. And then when I tune it to a right level that I want it to be at, abundance starts to flow, opportunities start to flow, certain people start to show up, business deals are presented, like not just theoretical business deals and hypothetical result-based business deals, but business deals that actually go through and produce results, win-win results. These business deals that go through, and whatever goes through, are not self-serving, I find. They also serve others, and they're in that space where I was talking about those three things. So this book also caused me to reflect even more. Okay, I reflected even deeper. Just like Think and Grow Rich, every time I read it, I reflect even deeper. But I recognize something, that what we're really working with here is this power, okay? God power or infinite intelligence when we start to go deeper in this process. And that infinite intelligence wants you to have all the abundance that you want. But the abundance that you really want, not what you superficially want. Because you might find yourself sometimes trying to achieve something or get a result and you just can't seem to do it. But that might actually be a result that you desire based on approval seeking or validation. But when you start to lift up your thoughts and you start to really work with this stuff and increase your awareness as to what makes you feel better, what makes you elevated, the Abraham Hicks stuff that they talk about, we talk about this all the time. The Esther and Jerry Hicks information, the vortex, getting in the vortex and the power behind it. But when you're in that space, you know what it's like. And so our job then is to ensure that we can get into that space and stay in that space. It's a creative space. It's a space of focus. It's a space of inspiration. And it is a space where you receive information from the infinite intelligence. So now let's talk about these areas of focus that I believe are really valuable in order to live a very happy, purposeful life where you're in service and one you get rewarded really well. Okay, not just being in service and then you're kind of drained from being in service. I believe in being in service and being abundantly in service. In other words, your giving is unconditional because you have so much to give. You have so much energy. You have so much passion to give. And then when you're operating in the space, you're also protected. You won't get people around you that suck your energy dry and just kind of drain you. That's what I found to be true. So quotes from the book and some other quotes from Yogananda on living a life of happiness. Okay, we talked about this. Live quietly in the moment and see beauty of all before you. The future will take care of itself. Live quietly in the moment and see the beauty of all before you. This is a great exercise. When we're walking around and we're observing nature, people, if you live in a big city, how do you look at others? Do you look at them with the lens of any of the emotions, the negative emotions that were talked about in Think and Grow Rich? Fear, anger, jealousy, resentment? Or are you patiently looking to see the beauty in everyone? Why would you do this? Well, because it makes you happy. And why is that important? Well, happiness is very important for one, but what's also important is that it lifts up your thoughts. It connects you to a higher level of connection with the infinite intelligence. That's where the inspirations come from. That's where you can attract people. Now, with Napoleon Hill's information, talked about how we've got the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and infinite intelligence, or the superconscious. If you're consciously thinking negative things, you're imprinting into your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is connected to the infinite intelligence, or the superconscious. So what are you trying to attract from the superconscious that is connected to the minds of everybody else? Probably a lot of negativity. Because we're all connected here. You have come to this earth to entertain and be entertained. I personally like a more poetic, artistic, theater approach to life, rather than this life of, oh, you got to do all these things and it's stressful and this is just how it is. A lot of people live like that, but you don't got to live like that if you work with this energy, if you work with this power. You'll start to see opportunity that is opportunity that you can enjoy cultivating your skills in, or utilize the skills that you're passionate about to create money. And those skills will be in service to others. Others will benefit of the net result of the service or products that you provide. In that process, you'll feel great. Your energy will be great. You'll attract people that you'll have exciting experiences with. I can speak this a lot about myself. I travel a lot. I do live events. I'll do the Speed Reading Workshop live events. I'll probably start doing other kinds of live events. Travel for leisure, travel for business. And I connect with amazing people all the time. I'll just meet them at the places I go, the events, or just out and about. I'll just meet people, make new friends, hang out. And I have these theatrical experiences with them. We go to all these exciting places. I get inspired. My inspiration for a lot of what I talk about through these books don't just come from the books, and don't just come from my past experience, because a lot of it comes from my past experience, because I've been involved with this for so long. But it comes from the experiences I have during the week when I'm going through the books, which is generated through these experiences that I have with others, these entertaining and experiences that, on the flip side, I'm creating it for them also. I'm creating more joy and theater in their lives. What people want in this world is not more like realism and just kind of like straightforwardness. Is they want more excitement. They want more play. They want more theater. And you can't forcefully try to make it happen, because that's not very smooth. You become the person. Okay, so Gandhi said this. You become the change that you want to see. Well, how do you become the person? Well, if you're surrounded by environments, roles, responsibilities, different kinds of things you have to do that cultivate this energy within you, that make you a more pleasant person, then it's easy to be that way. It's automatic. You're being real. It's not like you got putting on an act. Making others happy through kindness of speech and sincerity of right advice is a sign of true greatness. To hurt another soul by sarcastic words, looks, or suggestions is despicable. In the Kabbalion, they said, your inner world is a reflection of your outer world, and your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. As within, so without. And if you treat others poorly, then what you're really doing is treating yourself poorly. When you think low or you think negative about another person, you're actually just sending that negative thought into your subconscious mind and attracting more of that. Be comfortable within your purse. He often said, extravagance will buy you discomfort. So I've had some interesting thoughts about this. Why do we generate wealth? Why do we make money? Well, when you come from the perspective that what we're talking about here, money is a tool to be able to create happiness and joy in your life and provide you the necessities and needs and even the luxuries so you can perform better service for others. And it's also a resource that you can share with others so that they can improve their lives. You can make differences in the world through charity and so forth. And everything that you have right now, if you are operating from this, because you can trick and manipulate your way through reality and get a lot of money. But we're not working with that kind of energy here. We're working with a higher vibration, light energy, you could say. And when you work with this kind of energy, you will attract an infinite amount of abundance, as much as you possibly want, beyond money. You'll get stuff given to you for free. People will just do all kinds of stuff for you. You don't necessarily have to get money to be able to live the life you want. You'll find this to be true. They've actually found that a lot of people that are great value creators for others, that have impacted the lives of others so much, will go to restaurants and have other people pay their lunch or their dinner bill without even knowing who did it. This has been the case for a lot of people that I've read about. I can't remember who it was that I read about, but essentially, those that live in abundance and create abundance for others attract more abundance. But they don't get there overnight. They start with what they have right now. What you've got right now is the raw materials and the resources to be able to create the results you want. And that's the theme of what we talked about in the 50th Law by 50 Cent. Resourcefulness, that's just, you can say that's street knowledge. You work with what you have to create the results you want. Everything you need is within your awareness right now. But if you start to and let's say you attract a lot of wealth and abundance, it's easy to slip and to become spoiled. That's why no matter what level of wealth or abundance you get, practice resourcefulness and understand that the universe has given you this, yes, so you can have a good life. But the life that you have devoted yourself to is that of service. So that what you get is actually that in which you are to build yourself up to be in contribution even more so to others, to the divine will. Look fear in the face and it will cease to trouble you. So think about this for a moment. Fear, we've covered this extensively through many videos, especially in the Think and Grow Rich material. And there's many different kinds of fears. Fear of old age, fear of death, fear of ill health, all kinds of fears. These fears are revealing to you about yourself and the work that we need to do as we're self-realizing. A lot of these fears are not necessary. They're there to grow us, to reveal to us. As we experience them, we need to reflect and say, why are we experiencing this fear? Well, another thing I had learned from Bob Proctor was that he said in one of his videos, the terror barrier, which I mentioned a few times, and I'll put a link in the description to that if you haven't watched it, is that if it's not fearful and exciting at the same time, he doesn't do it. So think about that for a moment. Fear is actually a stepping stone into what we want a lot of times. And the way to know if it's the right thing is if it's fearful and it excites us. Now, here's the interesting thing, because I've worked with that. When I learned about that, I started working with it. And I started to sense and be like, well, if I have this fear towards doing this thing, do I also feel a sense of excitement about it? And I also ask myself the question, because I'm always litmus testing it to see if it's about contributing towards living a happy life, or is it going to bring me happiness? As a result, a lot of these things do. Living in purpose and being purposeful and being in service. So in other words, how does this contribute towards my vision? I talk about the DILTS model and working with the DILTS model to help you with that. And if I find that going through that actually contributes to what I want to create, which is actually what the infinite intelligence wants to create because I'm in alignment with that, then I'm going to do it, because I know that if I take that action, I will be met halfway. And I might not get the result that I want, my intended result, but I'm going to learn something. But I'm actually going to grow. I'm actually going to transform. I'm actually going to get to a higher level. There's a saying, you don't know what you don't know. Okay, so this is very interesting. You don't know what you don't know. Now, well, let's say you have this experience that you have to go through where it's fearful plus it excites you. One of the possibilities that exists on the other side is new understandings of how reality works, new understandings of the depth and dimension of how vast and complex and little do we know as far as this universe goes, and your ability to tap into that information. Do you think that information will be valuable, especially if others have not done it? I think it will be pretty valuable, because it's from that information, which comes from the infinite intelligence, which is through fear, that you can take that information and now work with it to create. You can get a source of creative inspiration. Now, the more you do that, it's not just the one idea that you get, but the connection and combination and the integration of all the other different ideas and experiences that you get each time that you go through something that is fearful and excites you, that allows you to create something in reality that is of service to others, that's really valuable, that has never existed before. It's a new way of doing things. Forget the past, for it is gone from your domain. Forget the future, for it is beyond your reach. Control the present. Live supremely well now. This is the way of the wise. A lot of times we look at where we are right now and we decide, okay, we're going to go in this direction towards achieving success or a higher level of self-realization or so forth. And then we start making the steps only to repeat our past. Maybe we start to think about our past and be like, well, it failed this time, or this person had said this, and we start to replay it in our mind. We talked about the mind earlier, and that whatever you think in your mind, you start to bring about in reality. Okay, really reflect upon that. What you start to think in your mind, you start to bring about in reality. It's going to show up in some shape or form. Some shape or form, it's going to show up. Think about situations in your life where you were thinking about a certain thought and it showed up in your life, positive or negative. Now, why does this happen? Well, I think we actually tap into some of these powers that what these yogis talk about. The yogi that, for example, that was able to manifest scent. Go read that particular chapter in the book and you'll see what he given a good explanation of how he works with the energies and the molecules and so forth to be able to create that. It's not a trick, and a lot of people might not believe that, but that's because they will not do the work and the long, arduous journey to be able to acquire a power like that. Do we need to acquire a power like that? Well, probably not. But we do have access to certain powers to be able to create what we want to create, which might not be that, but a degree easier, many degrees easier than something like that. But it starts with the mind, your ability to focus and keep your attention on your vision. And your vision must be one that brings you happiness and of contribution to others, has to be a divine vision, and it is one that is going to be of service. It's going to be of service to others. It's going to create, in reality, the evolution of humanity, the evolution of all living and humanity, or not humanity, but just life as a whole. Now, is this the only way of doing things? Well, I don't believe so. There's many ways of doing things. But I agree with this information that was covered in this book, and it's information that I've been working with, and it's purified my intent. And it has caused me to uplift my quality of character and to really practice my focus of will. And as a result of that, my level of awareness increases. And interestingly, as I mentioned earlier, that if you think about the past, you kind of throttle your ability to have self-awareness in the now. Think of a situation that you've been in where you're going to go do something and then all of a sudden you replay a past, part of your past. Maybe it's a rejection scenario or a scenario where you've been hurt, and you replay that in the present based on what you're trying to do. As a result of that, your self-awareness and your awareness of others starts to go down. You'll see this with a lot of people. They may be aware of what they want and who they are to a large degree, but they lack awareness when it comes to other people. They don't realize when they're being disrespectful or hurtful towards other people by the choice of words that they use and their very conduct and behavior. They don't realize it. And one of the reasons is because they live in the past. It's because they've been hurt in the past, or they've been in situations in the past that didn't work out, and they're just replaying it again. This stuff goes really deep. Self-realization is a long journey. As mentioned, it doesn't happen overnight, but it's worth pursuing. And then when you realize just how much it's worth pursuing, can you really waste your time in mediocre things, mundane things that are just petty worries and petty nonsense? Knowing that you would be happier if you did not do those things and that you would focus on what we're talking about here. Why? Because again, your happiness depends on it. Your ability to be in service depends on it. Feeling that sense of purpose in life and being purposeful depends on that. Ordinary love is selfish, darkly rooted in desires and satisfaction. Divine love is without condition, without boundary, without change. The flux of the human heart is gone forever at the transfixing touch of pure love. Now, the greatest love that you can ever feel is this connection with divine love, infinite intelligence. Because when you start to work on it, when you start to experience this, you'll experience it in your meditation, you'll experience it in the work that you do, the service that you do. Your self-esteem and your self-confidence and your self-respect goes up. And when it comes to earthly love that we seek from others, it pales in comparison to that. Now, that doesn't mean you can't experience earthly love with others. It's a great joy in life to experience love with another human being, whether it's romantic love, unconditional love and caring, relationship love, whether it's friendship love. These are great joys of life. But you'll never experience those and value those to the highest degree unless you connect to that divine love. Why? Because chances are that other love will be based on some kind of desire or condition. If you get enough love from within with your connection to the infinite intelligence. Now, I call it infinite intelligence. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it God. You can call it superconscious. Call it whatever you want. The same thing, that essence, the creator essence. When you establish that connection and you recognize you get all the love from there, now you're living in abundance. You are a person of abundance. Your communication is that of abundance. You have so much to give that you don't throttle back because you know that this is infinity and you can give way more. And you don't get burned out because there's no judgment or decision that needs to be made that's based on condition with another person. Wrath springs only from thwarted desires. I do not expect anything from others, so their actions cannot be in opposition to wishes of mine. I would not use you for my own ends. I am happy only in your own true happiness. Now, this is where a lot of people confuse the world of business. Okay? For many years, it was very transactional. Entrepreneurship sounds very transactional. It's actually not. Because when you come from this place, you understand nuance. And that when you create lots of value for others, and you look for ways of just distributing that value in various shapes, in forms, of various perspectives, I'm not going to get into a lengthy discussion on business building in this video. The reciprocity goes up. This universe is based on reciprocity. You start to get more return. Okay, this is automatic. It's when you start to get conditional. Okay, kind of this like, I'm going to do this for you and you do that for me. And if you don't do that for me, then I'm going to get upset and angry. And if you start to get like that, you're not playing with this kind of energy that we're talking about here. You're trying to do it your own way, which is not the way that is aligned with infinite intelligence. There's a reason why it's called infinite intelligence. The reason why it's called infinite intelligence is because this is an abundant source of intelligence that you can tap into to solve any problem, any circumstance, or change any perspective Because sometimes the problem exists in one perspective or one level of thought, but if you change your thought and your perspective around, now all of a sudden that's not a problem anymore. For example, if you go around expecting others to return the kind gestures you give to them, you put yourself at the mercy of that other person. If they don't return it, you're upset, you're angry, and that messes up your state. Well, if you give unconditionally kind gestures and you're like, well, if they respond back with something positive, cool. And if they don't respond back, cool. The same, you feel good. Well, now you've changed your perspective that one is in alignment with keeping that power, and you are operating from a place of unconditionals. But you're also able to tap into infinite intelligence more so because that's the vibration. That's the kind of, when you go into, and I'm going to do a discussion on this book, it's called Power versus Force. And there's a difference between power. And a lot of people think force is power. And when you think of power, it's all force. It's actually no. It's not like that. And many levels of consciousness that he talks about in the book, which I'll discuss, highest level of consciousness, one of the highest, is unconditional love. Is it because you like getting taken advantage of? Like you would think, some people might think, if I'm unconditionally loving to everyone, then people will take advantage of me. People take advantage of you because there's a part of you that is conditional. When you operate from true unconditional love, you don't find yourself in front of these people that want to take advantage of you. A lot of times people will take advantage of you because they think they know deep intuitively that they can take advantage of you. But if you don't have these stories, like conditions that we're talking about, or you don't have a desire to be around people that take advantage of you at a deep level, you're not going to experience that. And you're always going to have an experience of being able to share unconditional love from various platforms with people one-on-one, and it'll always be well received and appreciated because you believe it's always well received and appreciated, and thus it is. So those are some points on living from the book, A Life of Happiness. Well, what about being purposeful? Okay, what about living in purpose? Because a lot of things you could do, you can make yourself happy. But we're talking about those three things here, being in service and being purposeful. Well, let's look at some quotes here. Since you are alone since you are alone responsible for your thoughts, only you can change them. So it's about changing perspective and how you see reality. If you believe that you're not worthy of being purposeful, then it's going to be a harder time to be purposeful. If you go in the pursuit of purpose and you say, infinite intelligence, you connect, you do your connection, your meditation, and in your meditation, your desire, the burning desire, as Napoleon Hill calls it, is to create purpose in your life, to be purposeful, because you've recognized that by not being purposeful, that your rewards are shallow, the work you do is shallow, it's not really fulfilling. Now, what's purposeful for one person might not be purposeful for another person. So you might think, well, if everybody's doing what they love to do and being purposeful, then what about these jobs that people don't like doing? Well, those jobs might not exist because they'll somehow be replaced, or there'll be people that actually want to do it that do those jobs. Not everybody wants the same thing. But we have to have that desire to say, let's shift our thoughts and our awareness over to discovering what brings us purpose, how to be a purposeful person. And it starts by covering a lot of the points that we talked about in this video, as well as the points that were covered in the book. And when you start to reflect upon those thoughts, you start to have and entertain certain thoughts that now shape your reality, because thoughts are physical. When you have certain thoughts, you see reality based on those thoughts. It has a cause. The thought has a cause. It changes your physiology around, your emotions around. It changes your actions. And when you start to look at your thoughts, and again, a great audiobook to listen to, I'll put a link in the description, is As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. I also did a video on it. I'll probably do an updated video on it. Such a powerful audio. I listen to it once a week at least, sometimes multiple times a week. But you are responsible for your own thoughts. You have the ability to prevent certain disempowering information from going in and clouding your connection with the infinite intelligence. You have that ability. The yogis in the Himalayas can be in an environment where there is no distraction. There is nobody over there trying to seduce them in a certain direction and lead them astray, or distract them and bring them into a direction that is not of God. They're there and they're able to do it. It takes more presence, it takes more work to be able to do it in a busy world if you live in a city where there's a lot of distraction, especially in the world we live in right now, where technology, you don't even have to really live in a city. You can be distracted just by being on your computer and what kind of websites you go on and the apps that you use and the software that you use. Notifiers and different kinds of information that's presented to you right there is right there. And around your house, it could be empty. There could be nobody around for miles. But because you have an internet connection, you have a place where all these ideas go into your mind. And so we got to be very conscious on what goes into our mind. We've got to protect our mind. It makes a huge difference on how we navigate reality. The more deeply we perceive, the more striking becomes the evidence that a uniform plan links every form in manifold nature. So being in alignment and being purposeful go hand in hand. Because purposefulness is true purposefulness when you're in alignment with the universal plan, the divine plan. When you're in alignment, you will get stuff to do that is in contribution, that will produce the results that you want to live the life that you want, to take care of yourself. When you're not in alignment, you don't experience that. I've discussed and I've had conversations with many different people, entrepreneurs, artists, people who live in abundance and people that don't live in abundance. And what I find to be universally true with those that live in full abundance, full spectrum abundance, is that what they're doing is very purposeful in contribution, and it's evolving reality for everybody else towards this higher state of consciousness, towards others. That's what the Yogananda did. That's exactly what he did. And as a result of what he did, he got to experience a very phenomenal life. I think he lived a very interesting life. But it wasn't just about his entertainment of that interesting life, but the impact that he had on others. People like Steve Jobs, who then further Yogananda's work out, distributed it out by sharing it not only after he passed away, but all throughout his life. He would recommend people to read the book. So when you're in alignment, you're going to distribute the right information, that in which uplifts people, that in which helps others create a higher level of results and so forth. And this is all part of your increased perception of seeing how it all works. And when you start to do that more by actually saying, well, now this is interesting, I just brought that up, well, I'm going to live this from now on. I'm going to remove the noise out of my life, and that is what is going to distract me from being outside of my purpose, because it's very important. And you're going to find this to be true for everybody that I've met. When a person is purposeful, they are loving life, and they're enjoying, and they're in contribution. And when a person is not, they feel lost. Their life feels meaningless. They don't really want to get out of bed. So being on purpose and being purposeful can be given to you by the infinite intelligence. It's far better to do that because you'll be supported on that, and it'll be part of your true soul's desire than to just go ahead and create a random purpose. Man's conscious state is an awareness of body and breath. His subconscious state, active in sleep, is associated with his mental and temporary separation from body and breath. His superconscious state is a freedom from that delusion that existence depends on body and breath. God lives without breath. The soul, made in his image, becomes conscious of itself for the first time only during the breathless state. Worldly people do not like the candor which shatters their delusions. I think that goes very hand in hand. This reality that we see is real. We feel it. We experience our emotions. But it is a projection of how we believe reality to work. Take two people together and you sit them down and they have opposing viewpoints. One is adamant about how their reality works and the other person's adamant about how their reality works. And if they're both hard-headed, they have no interest in learning about the other person's perspective. They are absolutely convinced, and they can give you all kinds of supporting evidence to validate their point. If you ask them to debate each other, that debate is going to go nowhere because they're absolutely convinced. Is that a bad thing? Well, not really. When does it actually become a bad thing then? Well, who am I to say, but I notice this, that if a person's not happy, if they're not purposeful, and if they don't believe that they're in contribution and service for what they do, they're part of a bigger plan, that they start to experience certain kinds of things, like meaninglessness in their lives. So then, remember, we're creating all this, we're talking about this with a model of thought. Is this really how all this stuff works? Well, it's a conceptual model. We're just creating a conceptual model and saying, let's work with this model because this model has been known to help people feel purposeful in their life. Is it the only way of doing things? I don't know. But I do know this, that a lot of people that have adopted this kind of model live very happy, meaningful, purposeful lives and attract a lot of abundance and don't have any qualms about creating value and getting paid really well for that value with others, and a lot of other side benefits. So whatever worldview you choose to adopt, whatever way you choose to see reality, why not paint your mental model, your view of reality, like an artist would and an engineer would, like an architect, okay? Combining artfulness, theater, play, enjoyment with certain structure and certain form that is purposeful and leads directly towards what Earl Nightingale talks about, a specific worthwhile ideal. And so his definition of success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Now, we're going to talk about laws of success in a moment in Yogananda's other book that I had to get and read because I just was so curious about it, and also related back to the points that we discussed, because we're discussing this book from a certain perspective. Okay, so this is my perspective, and this is the perspective of those that watch my videos, but it's not the only perspective of how to read this book, or it's not the information exactly verbatim what was in the book per se, direct interpretation, because you can't really interpret a book like this one way. What you're going to see in a book like this is yourself. It's going to reveal things about yourself. It's going to show you things that you're doing right, and it's going to show you things that you know in your heart is not right. That's the power of this book. This book is a mirror. Yogananda was a very, very deep person, and anybody who gets to a point of that level of depth and understanding, when they write and when they create philosophy, it has multidimensional meaning. And the best way to interpret or essentially experience a book like this is to recognize that it's a mirror to yourself, and that, most important, the intent that was put into the book was to bring you towards this place called self-realization, this really high realization of your connectedness with spirit and your ability to access it and your ability to work with it. And as a result of it, you have a lot of happiness and joy in your life. That's what he wanted. He wanted that wisdom from the East to be brought into the day-to-day lives of how we practice in the West. And a lot of people right now in the West, I see this, are not using these philosophies, not integrating these philosophies. But what an amazing thing that happens when you start to integrate these philosophies. Let's talk about being in service. Okay, being in service. Some people try to be tall by cutting off the heads of others. So when we're working with this energy, when we're operating from this perspective that we're talking about here, there is no need to bring another person down. If you're playing this game where you have to bring someone down so that you can lift yourself up, then you're not operating from an elevated perspective to see an alternative way of doing it that doesn't require you to be involved with conflict that is unnecessary. Okay, having a discussion, and sometimes conflict is necessary in certain situations, but it's not necessary if the motive behind it is to focus on who is right rather than what is right. That's an elevated perspective. The human mind is a spark of the almighty consciousness of God. I could show you that whatever your powerful mind believes very intensely would instantly come to pass. Now, this is what all the wise people, philosophers, have agreed upon. The one point, as mentioned in Earl Nightingale's The Stranger's Secret, that we become what we think about. It's universal. We become what we think about. Now, our thoughts are so deeply rooted and they're so complex. When you think you want something, you say, okay, I want to make this amount of money. Well, I believe we should dimensionalize how we want to make the money. We should get really specific. There's a saying, be careful what you ask for. You just might get it. Because if you really want the divine assistance, then that money has to come from a result of real, good, proper service. And that's what Earl Nightingale talks about in Stranger's Secret as well, is essentially what are you going to do for that in which you ask for? What is your involvement in the process? What is your contribution? And if it is your contribution, is it from a highest level of ethos, ethics, and values, essentially from a high place of quality of character? Because if so, you're going to attract the opportunity. If so, you'll be able to execute the opportunity towards completion. Now, I see this with a lot of people. Some people are good at attracting opportunities because they kind of halfway know what they want. But from the opportunities that they attract, they don't really value them. They may value them on a surface level. And as a result, they're not able to execute as well to get the most out of those opportunities. That's because they have a very surface level or shallow way of looking at reality. Now, to each their own, but if we actually learn to value things, opportunities, people even more so, then we're going to get greater results, greater yield, greater value out of that. And we won't need as many opportunities. We can work with what we have. But that's a belief system. Think about that for a moment. That's a thought process that I just identified. Would that be a better thought process than just, I want to make X amount of money? Those that just say, I want to make X amount of money, and are not keeping into consideration, I'm not saying we got to overthink this, because look, at the end of the day, you get better with experience. This, again, is the growth of self-realization. It takes time, it takes experience. Sometimes you'll make mistakes. It's okay to fall, get back up. The more you try, the more you learn. And then you start to refine your thoughts even more. It's very refined. But thoughts are the driving element. The deeper the self-realization of a man, the more he influences the whole universe by his subtle spiritual vibrations, and the less he sees himself is affected by phenomenal flux. Thought is so deeply rooted. It is so complex and has so many facets and elements to it. And the thoughts influence our behaviors and our actions, which have short-term, medium-term, long-term implications that keep going. It just keeps going, those implications. And the purity of the intent in which we act upon the thought is dependent on how realized you are. And so the goal is to become more realized, to be aware when you're connecting with people, to be aware of the implications of everything you do. And again, you don't have to do this overnight. But the more you become aware and the greater of depth and magnitude that you apply to integrating what we're talking about here, the greater the level of self-awareness that you will be capable of achieving in this lifetime. And it's with that self-awareness that you understand self-awareness external, but internal self-realization, and recognizing how to impact others, how to create change in the universe. It starts within yourself. Again, that's why Gandhi always said, be the change. Okay, so one of my favorite philosophies comes from NLP. You go first. Be the change. Do the thing that you want others to do. Do not talk about things unless you are doing it and living it, because you can't really have an impact on a person. And this goes back to the Yogananda's book. It's like he can talk about all those things that he talks about because of the experiences that he went through and the journey that he went through. And that was his autobiography, the different journeys and experiences he had with those different yogis and himself and so forth, and what he contributed. And a simple book like that, which might be very long, but full of like simple stories, can provide such a powerful transformative experience for the reader. The transformational experience for the reader is created based on the action taking and the living of the philosophy of the writer. It's very important. The balanced rhythm of the universe is rooted in reciprocity. So the more service you create, so perish any kind of nonsensical thought you have when you're working with the lower vibrations. It tends to be true that reciprocity is not even and so forth. But when you operate from a higher level, reciprocity is absolute and it is fair. And if you don't see it's fair, one only has to lift themselves up, increase a level of awareness to recognize how what you are putting out wasn't actually of value as much as you thought based on your ego. Good manners without sincerity are like a beautiful dead lady. Good manners without sincerity. Genuineness, realness, is the way to tap into and way to cultivate everything we're talking about. You've got to be genuine and you've got to be real. Because when a person's real, you have more impact in the life of others. Transformative impact. When someone's not real and very surface level, they're really revealing to themselves and others their fears, insecurities, and disrespect that they have for their time, energy, and opportunity cost. Now, it can be fearful to be real because then you can get hurt. But we talked about this in The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida, that it's better to keep an open heart even while you're being hurt, because then you have access to this power. The moment you close your heart up, that's when you start going into the dark energies. Then you're not working with this power that we're talking about here. And you can't be receptive to the depths of the connection. Yeah, it's painful to have your heart hurt. It's painful. Of course. Everybody experiences that pain in some shape in their life. But those that are truly strong remain open despite the pain. And it might take years to open yourself back up, but it's a journey that is worth taking. Why? Because the next quote here. There is a magnet in your heart that will attract true friends. This magnet is unselfishness, thinking of others first. When you learn to live for others, they will live for you. And always remember that you belong to no one and no one belongs to you. We're taught in most of society that we got to own people and people got to own us, and there's like this ownership thing going on. People have power. Nobody owns anyone. You don't need to own anyone. Everything you have is within yourself to create a fulfilling life. The moment you start to think that you got to have control over somebody to be able to have, you're not working with this energy anymore. And you're not going to tap into those powers that come as a result of working with this energy. Reflect that someday you will suddenly have to leave everything in this world, so make this acquaintanceship with God. Remain calm, serene, always in command of yourself. You will then find out how easy it is to get along. In your dealings with people, in everything you do when you're in service, practice willpower to remain calm, serene, and in command of yourself, and respectful towards another person and the implications of what that is going to manifest. And recognize that by doing so, you're putting good out. It's not just the work you do, but how you do the work. That's very important. So now let's cover the laws of success using the power of spirit to create health, prosperity, and happiness, which was another book that he did. We'll do a sub-discussion on it. The power of thought. You demonstrate success or failure according to your habitual trend of thought, in you which is the stronger success thought or failure thought. If your mind is ordinary in a negative state, an occasional positive thought is not sufficient to attract success. But if you think rightly, you will find your goal even though you seem to be enveloped in darkness. That's why it's so important to listen to audio like The Strangest Secret over and over and over again. As a Man Thinketh, over and over again. That's why Steve Jobs would read this book every year, over and over again. When you come across a powerful piece of content or a powerful book that is pure, that uplifts you, that brings you, you can just lose yourself in that piece of content. Because in the process of losing yourself, you'll discover yourself. You'll be elevated. You'll become that information. And thought, a lot of times, is programmed by the external world, the information that we consume. So we have to be very, very, very aware, self-awareness again, of the kind of information we're consuming. Will is the dynamo. Along with positive thinking, you should use willpower and continuous activity in order to be successful. Every outward manifestation is a result of will, but this power is not always used consciously. There's a mechanical will as well as a conscious will. Now, a lot of people think like, okay, just because you have access to infinite intelligence, you get these great ideas and whatnot, that you don't have to do anything. Like, you have to do stuff. We live in physical reality. If you want to get fit and healthy, you have to eat healthy. You have to be fit. You know, there's exceptions to the rules, and there's probably like some spiritual powers that transcend it. But there's a reason why we practice willpower. Because willpower in those activities actually strengthens our ability to stay focused in the meditation, to be more aware of where something is raising or lowering our vibrations so we can adjust it accordingly, so we can be in a place where we're more in connection with infinite intelligence. You can control destiny. Mind is the creator of everything. You should therefore guide it to create only good. If you cling to a certain thought with dynamic willpower, it finally assumes a tangible outward outcome. When you are able to employ your will always for constructive purposes, you become the controller of your destiny. But you should always be sure within the calm region of your inner self that what you want is right for you to have and in accord with God's purpose. You can then use all the force of your will to accomplish your object, keeping your mind, however, centered on the thought of God, the source of all power and all accomplishment. So whenever you find yourself getting thrown off course, it's important to go back into a meditation. It's important to connect back to the infinite intelligence. It's from there that you're able to gather the insight, the idea, the very action item that's required to be able to solve the problem. Again, you can't solve the problem in the state in which you created it. If you happen to drop into a different vibration and you experience a problem, recognize that you probably can't solve the problem in that state. So it's then worth going out and raising your state. So I've got a number of things that I do to raise my state. Meditation being one of them. Connecting with people. I love connecting with people because just by connecting with a broad spectrum of people, my state goes up. Then Tony Robbins has things like, physiologically jumping up and down or some kind of word. Jordan Belfort in The Way of the Wolf talks about using some kind of peppermint on your nose, anchoring it to peak state. Whatever it is, those are the states that we need to access to solve the problem. And in Think and Grow Rich, there was a story about a man who used to solve problems, a consultant, by figuring out, okay, what's the problem that the client is having, and then you would go and sit down and you would meditate, and you would go in a room and you would put a pad and paper and you would come up with the answer. So that's what we're talking about here. Fear exhausts life energy. Fear exhausts life energy. It is one of the greatest enemies of dynamic willpower. Fear causes life force that ordinarily flows steadily through the nerves to be squeezed out and the nerves themselves to become as though paralyzed. The vitality of the whole body is lowered. Fear doesn't help you get away from the object of fear. It only weakens your willpower. Fear causes the brain to send an inhibiting message to all bodily organs. It constricts the heart, checks the digesting functions, and causes many other physical disturbances. When the conscious is kept on God, you have no fears. Every obstacle will then be overcome by courage and faith. When you encounter fear, And you know it's that fear you have to go through because it excites you. You're like, okay, well, this is going to lead me to my goal. Put your thought on faith. Faith towards the infinite intelligence. Faith that you will have access to exactly what to do. And it may not work out in your favor, but have faith that you will learn something from that experience that you will forever take, that cannot be taught. You cannot read it in a book. You cannot watch in a video. That learning will be a unique experience to you. Failures should arouse determination. Even failures should act as a stimulus to your willpower and to your material and spiritual growth. When you have failed in any project, it is helpful to analyze every factor in the situation in order to eliminate all chances in the future that you might repeat the same errors. So we have to be failing in this journey. Failing is actually another demonstration of our faith. We demonstrate faith when we fall and get back up and do it again. But we don't just get up and do it again blindly, we optimize. See, what Yogananda talks about is not just, far out yogi type of mystical practices, but pragmatism, reality. Because we're incorporating physical, mind, body, and spirit. We're looking at the different parts of ourselves, the physical, mental, emotional, connecting it to the spiritual. And part of physical reality is falling down and getting back up. And that creates more willpower. That creates more faith. And faith, as Napoleon Hill puts it, is the only element, or not the only element, one of the important elements, in which it speaks to infinite intelligence. So it's the essence of prayer. And infinite intelligence will respond accordingly with faith. So if you don't have faith, then you don't get the response of infinite intelligence. Well, how do you cultivate faith? By failing, putting yourself in situations where you fail and getting back up, seeing it as an exercise. The need for self-analysis. Another secret of progress is self-analysis. Introspection is a mirror in which to see recesses of your mind and otherwise would remain hidden from you. Diagnose your failures and sort out your good and bad tendencies. Analyze what you are, what you wish to become, and what your shortcomings are impeding you. Create the creative power of initiative. What is initiative? It is a creative faculty within you, a spark of the infinite creator. It may give you the power to create something no one has ever created. It urges you to do things in new ways. The accomplishments of a person of initiative may be as spectacular as a shooting star. Apparently, creating something from nothing, he demonstrates that the seemingly impossible may become possible by one's employment of the greater initiative, or inventive, I should say, power of the Spirit. See the image of God in all men. Many people excuse their own faults but judge other people harshly. We should reverse this attitude by excusing others' shortcomings and by harshly examining our own. Now, this is a powerful paradigm shift, and it's probably one of the greatest things that we could do. Rather than finding judgments and faults in others, look to see where we contributed to the problem, where we screwed up. This is how you also develop long-range thinking. You're able to determine how to not end up in that situation again. If you end up in a situation in which you end up in conflict with someone, figure out how you got there, how you attracted that person, and what that person was teaching you about yourself. Habits of thought controls one's life. Success is hastened or delayed by one's habits. It is not past inspirations. It's not your passing inspirations or brilliant ideas so much as your everyday mental habits and control of your life. Habits of thoughts are mental magnets that draw to you certain things, people, and conditions. Good habits of thoughts enables you to attract benefits and opportunities. Bad habits of thoughts attract you to materially minded persons and to unfavorable environments. Power of divine will. Divine will has no boundaries. It works through laws known and unknown, natural and seemingly miraculous. It can change the course of destiny, wake the dead, cast mountains into the sea, and create new solar systems. From the ocean of abundance, Just as all power lies in his will, so all spiritual and material gifts flow from his boundless abundance. In order to receive his gifts, you must eradicate from your mind all thoughts of limitation and poverty. Again, all thoughts of limitation and poverty. Universal mind is perfect and knows no lack. To reach that never-failing supply, you must maintain a consciousness of abundance. I talked about this many times in previous videos. Success consciousness, and all the different belief systems and ideologies that I've shared in those videos contribute towards the success consciousness. Even when you do not know where the next dollar is coming from, you should refuse to be apprehensive. When you do your part and rely on God to do his, you will find that mysterious forces come to your aid and that your constructive wishes soon materialize. This confidence and consciousness of abundance are attained through meditation. Next is the way of meditation. By the power of concentration and meditation, you can direct the inexhaustible power of your mind to accomplish what you desire and to guard every door against failure. All successful men and women devote their time to deep concentration. They're able to dive deeply within their minds and to find the pearls of right solutions for the problems that confront them. If you learn how to withdraw your attention from all objects of distraction and to place it upon the object of concentration, you too will know how to attract at will whatever you need. Learn how to withdraw your attention from all objects of distraction and place it upon one object of concentration. So, if you know what it is that you want to achieve and you have kept into consideration all the pieces that I've talked about and what was discussed in the book and the various other elements that I had pulled from different quotes and shared as a result of working with the three pieces that I talked about, living a happy life, living a life of happiness, making a commitment to live a life of happiness so that you could be better at doing the things that you want to do, being more purposeful and being more in service to others, in which you get rewarded really well doing as far as success goes. If you recognize what those things are that you need to work on. So, for example, in my last video, I did a discussion on the DILTS model. I recommend you watch that video so you can see it. But when everything is aligned, then you know what you have to do. And anything else is a distraction. You've made a decision. You've done your exploring. And by the way, this doesn't happen overnight. This happens with time and experience. But you can get there faster by, and this is what we're talking about when we say purifying your intent. By purifying your intent, the process. And the DILTS model is great to help you with purifying your intent. Well, what happens then is that you know where your attention needs to go, and you know internally without a doubt what is a distraction, and nobody can tell you otherwise. It's easier for you to say no. It's easier for you to ignore. It's easier for you to say yes. Why? Because you know that your purpose is to be in contribution and create those results, because that's where you're going to get success from. But it's not a surface level success. We're working with high level powers here. So it's a success that's designed to uplift you so you can be in more of contribution, so your life is meaningful, so it's more purposeful, so that you help out others and you create whatever results in various shapes or forms. For every person, it's different. Some people create emotional results for others, some create physical results for others, some create mental results for others, some help others go out and create results. Whatever needs to get done, whatever the piece is, if you know what your plan is and your purpose is, and you discovered it through this process and you keep refining it, then it's easier to determine what is a distraction and what is worth your attention. Now, meditation helps you get there, because studies have shown that meditation aligns different pathways in the brain. You actually start to develop more physical gray matter in the brain. A lot of different things happen to help you become in alignment. Success is measured by happiness. Consider whether fulfillment of the goal you have chosen will constitute success. What is success? If you possess health and wealth, but have trouble with everybody, including yourself, yours is not a successful life. Existence becomes futile if you cannot find happiness. When wealth is lost, you have lost a little. when health is lost, you've lost something of more consequence. But when peace of mind is lost, you have lost the highest treasure. And finally, put God's power behind your efforts. Release for constructive purposes the power you already have, and more will come. Move on your path with unflinching determination, using all the attributes of success. Tune yourself with the creative power of the Spirit. You'll be in contact with the infinite intelligence that is able to guide you and solve all your problems. Power from the dynamic source of your being will flow uninterruptedly, so that you will be able to perform creatively in any sphere of activity. So these are my insights and perspectives from the book Autobiography of the Yogi, as well as the book The Law of Success, Using the Power of Spirit to Create Health, Prosperity, and Happiness. And this was my reflections in the book, so maybe as you go and read the book, you might get something else out of it, totally different, or stuff that's very related. But the truth is this: everybody who reads the Autobiography of the Yogi pulls out information that is based on who they are, their individuality, and their sameness and their connectedness to everybody else. And they start to move more in the direction of higher self-realization. They start to become more confident, like core confidence. We spend a lot of time in our lives looking for happiness in others and in things, rather than coming from a place of sharing happiness with others. When you start to uncover the depth and knowledge that's contained within this book by just going through it and relating it back to your life, a lot of times just subconsciously, because the information and the way the book is written, the energy in the book is so powerful, you start to connect to a deeper meaning. You start to look at reality different. It changes your worldview. It really does. I think this is probably one of the most powerful books that I've ever read, and I recommend reading The Autobiography of the Yogi. Hope you enjoyed my discussion points, my interpretation, and my takeaways from this book, and it benefits you, not just what I shared, but your exploration of the book and your own research and depth of understanding into his work and the various principles and disciplines that he wanted to share with everyone. Thank you very much for watching. If you want a copy of the mind map, the link is in the description. I will talk to you soon. Take care.